Artillery, Department number 5 is now in session. Honorable Judge Kalashi presiding. Please be seated and come to order.
Good evening, all, and welcome to Department 5. I think we need introduction at this point. Let's start with the prosecution team.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Grant Peck, and I will be presenting today's pretrial motion for the people in this action. Would counsel please introduce themselves?
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Noel Andrew, and I am for the people in this action. Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Kenya Ochoa, and I am for the people in this action. May our witnesses please introduce themselves?
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Joshua Gilchrist, and I will be portraying Adrian Carroll.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Claire Yang, and tonight I will be portraying Devin Morrison.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Steve Fonseca, and I'll be portraying Hayden Rodriguez.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Devon Campbell, and I will be portraying Morgan Bonders. At this time, our clerk, please introduce herself.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Lisa Kim, and today I will be the court's clerk, and I will be giving a visual warning at 2 minutes, 1 minute, and 30 seconds. I'll be giving a visual and verbal warning at stop. At this moment, all arguments must cease. Thank you.
Defense.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Ethan Scholl, and I will be presenting the pretrial motion for defense. Will my counsel please introduce themselves?
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Trinity White, and I am for Casey Davidson in this action. Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Justin Lopez, and I am for Casey Davidson in this action.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Wendy Navarro, and I am for Casey Davidson in this action. May our witnesses please introduce themselves?
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Amy Hernandez, and tonight I will be portraying Avery Williams.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Skylar Singh Zabani, and tonight I'll be portraying Adrian Murray.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Leslie Guerrero, and I'll be portraying Tori Lee.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Juan Galan, and I will be portraying the defendant, Casey Davidson. At this time, may our bailiff introduce himself.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Jonathan Kamaki, and I'll be tonight's bailiff for tonight's proceedings. At this time, may I give the rules of the court?
Sure.
There is to be no eating, no gum chewing, no excessive exiting or re-entering the courtroom, and there is no use of cell phones or any other electronic devices. And there is to be no contact with any of the participants of the mock trial competition. If any of these rules are broken or disrupted in any manner, I may ask you to leave the courtroom. All must remain seated unless an emergency arises. If an emergency arises, there's exits to behind you and behind me. All witnesses must wait for me at the gate and wait for me to escort them to the witness stand. Once again, I ask to please silence all cell phones.
Thank you. Now I think we can begin with the pretrial motion. And I think you all know both sides have 4 minutes to present their arguments, and we'll start with the defense.
May it please the court. Your Honor, the GPS information taken by Detective Adrian Carroll regarding the whereabouts of my client, Mr. Casey Davidson's effect, should not be admitted as evidence into the People v. Davidson trial. Reason one being that Davidson did not voluntarily submit this information to the third party, therefore Davidson has an expectation within that information. Reason two being that it was essentially allowed the government to go back in time and take information to incriminate innocent people like my client, Mr. Casey Davidson. Reason three being it would be too far a governmental intrusion into our personal privacy. Your Honor, going back to my first argument, that Davidson did not voluntarily submit this information. Your Honor, in the reapplication case on page 26, which is from the Northern District.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. In the United States versus Miller case, does that holding help you or hurt you?
The United States Miller case, it essentially does both. It helps us establish the third party doctrine, which I will apply later in our case, but it also helps prosecution in the sense of determining what is voluntarily giving information to the third party.
Okay, now in the Miller case, what was the holding here?
In the Miller case, I believe in the Miller case they held that when consumers voluntarily give up their information, they no longer have a right to that information.
No reasonable expectation of privacy there, right?
Yes.
You're right. So why would that be the same case here?
Your Honor, as I was about to get into, the GPS in this case is constantly submitting that information, whether the GPS is in use or not. And because of that, Your Honor, and along with the fact that it's not a proven fact that Davidson was even using this GPS, it's reasonable to say that the GPS wasn't even on, therefore Davidson was not submitting information to the third party.
Okay, if it wasn't on, it's not gonna help the prosecution, is it?
That comes later in my argument. The Miller case is completely different from what we're talking about. In the Miller case, they're voluntarily submitting information. Now, if that was the case, if prosecution is to make that argument that Davidson was voluntarily submitting that information, then that could possibly help them.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, in the reapplication case on page 26, the government sought access to 60 days worth of cell site location information. In this case, they held that because the consumers did not voluntarily share information, along with the fact that the cell phone was always submitting information, whether it was on or not in use, just like in our case, the GPS was constantly submitting information. They held that because of that, people have that expectation of privacy. And that should be exactly what's going on here. Davidson should have that expectation of privacy within that digital data.
Doesn't everybody that have a phone now know that this GPS is there? I mean, do they even think they have an expectation of privacy?
Well, Your Honor, everyone can have different opinions about that. And I'd say, yes, people do realize that when you're actively using a phone, information has to be going somewhere. But the fact that they were taking information, whether it's away in your pocket or off, and not only collecting that information, storing it for days, weeks, months at a time, and using that information to incriminate innocent people, I don't think society has recognized that by now. Now, Your Honor, going to my second point, that it's too far an intrusion into it's too far of a governmental intrusion into our personal privacy. In the Riley v. California case,
Which case?
Riley v. California.
Okay.
In Riley v. California case, Riley was pulled over for an expired registration. They found a gun and they searched his phone and connected him to a crime. And Your Honor, in this case, they determined that when privacy-related concerns are weighty enough, the government requires a warrant. Now, in our case, Your Honor, Detective Adrian Carroll did get a court order pursuant to get this information, but that should not be enough. Carroll should have gotten a warrant, Your Honor. It's too unconstitutional to take someone's personal privacy, digital personal privacy, which in this case, Your Honor, would almost expose Davidson to more than a typical more than a typical search of the house, and say, hey, we have reasonable grounds to get this information, why not just take it? Your Honor, GPS information reveals too much about a person. It could reveal almost everything about them, where they like to eat, how many times a month or week they eat there, how religious they are depending on how many times they go to religious places. Your Honor, it can reveal if they're having an affair with their wife, by how many times they go to a certain person's house, what people they like, how many times they see that person. Your Honor, it would allow the government to essentially know everything about them, all at the hands of court order, not even a warrant.
But isn't it a good law enforcement tool also?
What are you asking? Is the SCA a good law enforcement tool?
I don't know, GPS stuff can help track where a criminal is.
Well, if I'm correct, Your Honor, the car that had the GPS was Davidson's property, not property of the government. So since applying the fact that this was Davidson's property, this was Davidson's effect, that would give the government no reasonable grounds to come in without a warrant and take this information. It's essentially the same as searching and seizing something from his house. Now, Your Honor, let me point you to my third argument. The fact that this would essentially allow the government to go back in time and take information. Your Honor, this would allow them to do that because they're taking information, historical information from the past, and bringing it right back up to incriminate people like my client, Mr. Casey Davidson. This is essentially the same as allowing them to place a physical tracker on their car. Your Honor, this information should not be admitted as evidence in the People v. Davidson trial for 3 reasons. Reason 1 being that Davidson did not voluntarily submit this information. Reason 2 being that it would be too far a governmental intrusion into our personal privacy. And reason 3 being that it will allow the government to go back in time and take this information. Thank you, Your Honor.
Sure.
Your Honor, the first thing that must be understood is the defendant voluntarily gave over this information to the third party, thus making the information property of the third party. In United States v. Miller, this was the case. Miller had submitted personal documents to the banks, and then he was suspected of avoiding a whiskey tax.
Yeah, but doesn't the Jones case fly in the face of that?
Sorry, the Jones case? Well, in this case, it's more of a the voluntary submission of documents that they have no interest in, rather than in Jones, where it would be information that the client would have personal interest in.
Wouldn't you have a personal interest if some law enforcement agency put a tracking device on your car, unbeknownst to you?
Well, in Jones, the difference between our case as well as Miller and Jones is there was no actual physical intrusion into anyone's effect, as the government didn't forcefully or coercively place the GPS in the defendant's vehicle in our case. This being much different than consenting in Miller to giving over your information, or say having something placed within someone's vehicle. Your Honor, the defendant had no expectation of privacy in this information because they voluntarily gave it over.
When do we have privacy expectations any longer?
Well, when you're definitely not when you're voluntarily submitting, giving over your privacy by.
So anytime you use a cell phone now, forget about it. There's just no privacy there at all.
Well, according to United States v. Graham, there's obviously something that had changed within society where it's now reasonable to expect that you, by using a service or a product such as a cell phone or a GPS, you are submitting you're submitting certain things, but that is on you. You're not coerced to do so. You're not made to use a phone, made to use a GPS.
Isn't it almost a necessity in today's society to have a cell phone? It's not a choice.
If it really
Do you have one?
I do, Your Honor.
I bet you do.
But it's not a necessity in the sense of you still have options. You can choose to get a flip phone. You can choose to get a car without a GPS. You're not limited to certain utilities. They're even within the utilities that may be deemed in today's society as necessary. There are still options within them.
Okay.
Your Honor, because the defendant voluntarily gave over this information because they voluntarily purchased and utilized the product. It is a long-held legal standard that it is the consumer's burden to inform themselves on the functions and uses of a product. It's not the question isn't in this case if Davidson knew or didn't know that this information was being transmitted. It's whether they had the GPS. That's where they purchased the vehicle. It's whether they had possession of it. The second, furthermore, the defendant had no expectation of privacy in the location that was seized. The location that was seized, the two locations, were both on public roads. In the United States v. Knox, it says, and I quote, "There is no expectation of privacy on public roads." This being the case, regardless of whether Casey Davidson had voluntarily given over this information, they could have just as easily observed through, say, even retroactive means such as security cameras, because obviously if you're outside a warehouse, warehouses have security cameras to stop thieves. There's different means to which you could get the same information, which is exactly what the ruling was in United States v. Knox. Third case being that the defendant's information was seized lawfully by Detective Adrian Carroll. Your Honor, a warrant is not needed to obtain this information. Under the Stored Communications Act, this information, as long as it was in possession of a third party, and there was reasonable expectation that the defendant, that the information that was being sought is relevant to an ongoing investigation. The purpose of me saying this is the level of burden that you need to get information under the Stored Communications Act is exactly what you need to get a court order, which Detective Adrian Carroll did. So because Adrian Carroll got a court order, the burden to get information under the Stored Communications Act was met. Thus, a warrant was not needed. Your Honor, because the defendant had no expectation of privacy in the information that they themselves voluntarily gave over to the third-party GPS company, because the defendant voluntarily knew and used the service, and because the defendant had no expectation of privacy in the location itself, as well as the information being lawfully gathered, we, the people, ask you to suppress the defense's motion. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Each side has 2 minutes.
Opposing counsel has stated that it's not a necessity to use a cell phone, and that is completely true. But in the Riley v. Miller case, they held that because almost 90% of people have cell phones, that the digital data cannot be used as a weapon. Your Honor, a house is not a necessity, but guess what? We still use houses. Why? Because it benefits us. It benefits society as a whole. It keeps a person intact, Your Honor. Although cell phones are not a necessity, they become normalized in society, and this is exactly what it's about. Society standards, Your Honor, about whether people know that this information is being stored and kept for long periods of time. Your Honor, also, if I may point you to the pretrial stipulations. Pretrial stipulation number 4, actually. The court order was insufficient to constitute a warrant for purposes under the 4th Amendment. Your Honor, Detective Adrian Carroll needed a warrant. He needed a warrant to get this information because allowing him to get this information simply with a court order pursuant to the SCA, the grounds are not the same. The grounds are completely unrelated to what opposing counsel has said. Your Honor, if a neighbor called in and said, hey, I believe that my neighbor is dealing drugs, the government wouldn't instantly go bang down the door and say, hey, guess what, we heard someone was talking about you selling drugs, so we went and got a warrant, Your Honor. That's not how it works. They can't get a warrant just because they believe. That's exactly what happened in our case. Bonnerman said, I believe I saw Davidson's car out next to the warehouse. He said he believed. It's not even a fact. It's not proven, Your Honor. Also, opposing counsel is assuming that Davidson had any idea that this information was being taken. Opposing counsel is also assuming that Davidson bought this car, Your Honor. Opposing counsel is relying on assumptions rather than the real facts of this case. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I rebuttal, Your Honor? Your Honor, stipulation 4 basically is just saying that the court order was not a warrant. It was just laying that grounds to show that it wasn't a warrant. My argument is that you don't need a warrant, you just need a court order under the Stored Communications Act because the burden is the same. Your Honor, Davidson actually, within his statement, acknowledged the existence of the GPS. Page 40, line 44. Again, we are.
Show off?
Sorry?
Trying to show off?
Your Honor, much of the defense's argument lie on that it is too much of an intrusion. But this idea is not supported by any Supreme Court rulings. Rather, it is opinionated and not based off of any case law or stipulations. Rather, it's arguing that a warrant is needed when nothing in the packet says anything about them needing a warrant. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Is the matter submitted then for my ruling? That's normally what happens. Okay. I'm granting the motion. I think that it was an intrusion that required a warrant because I think there was a reasonable expectation. Okay. Okay, thank you, Bill.
Your Honor, do we have permission to rearrange the courtroom?
Sure. Both sides ready?
Your Honor, before trial begins, the prosecution does have a few preliminary matters. Do we have freedom to move about the courtroom?
Sure.
And also, we have showed opposing counsel's exhibits A through J and are marked as such. So we would like to simply approach the witness rather than asking them to show them the exhibits.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And I believe the people of the state of California are charging the defendant, Casey Davidson, with count 1, which is the charge of murder, which is the unlawful killing of another human being with malice aforethought. And I believe we're going to have opening statements now. And are you ready to present yours?
May I begin?
You may.
Your Honor, committing a murder requires waiting for the opportune moment. On September 14, 2017, after a political rally in Acorn, California, Alex Thompson was found dead. Today, Your Honor, the people charge the defendant, Casey Davidson, with first-degree murder. Over the years, the town of Acorn has been split on the issue of immigration. There are two opposing groups, Our America and Equality for All. Alex Thompson was a member of Our America, and Casey Davidson was a member of Equality for All. Over time, the rivalry between these two escalated into full-blown arguments and even physical encounters beginning a year ago. Today, Your Honor, Detective Adrian Carroll will tell you that he found 2 threatening social media posts made on the defendant's account. 3 months before the rally, there was a post that read, "Oh, Kennedy followers like Thompson don't deserve to live." And then, just 4 days before the rally, Casey Davidson made another post directed towards Alex Thompson that said, "Someone should kill idiots like you." On the day of the rally, Casey Davidson and his Equality for All group came to protest. Police line formed, and Alex Thompson soon crossed over this line. A scuffle occurred between Alex Thompson and Casey Davidson. Casey Davidson eventually yelled, "Get back on your side of the line, or you'll get what's coming to you." Then, prosecution's witness, Hayden Rodriguez, will tell you today that she saw, after Alex Thompson had got punched from behind and suffered a bloody nose, and retreated to the bathroom, she saw Casey Davidson mutter, or actually state, "Here's my chance," and then follow Alex Thompson in the exact same direction that Thompson was going, all while carrying his walking stick. Your Honor, today, prosecution's expert witness, Devin Morrison, will tell you that she conducted Alex Thompson's autopsy. She'll also tell you that came to the conclusions that Alex Thompson suffered from not one, but 2 strikes to the head, and that Alex Thompson's assailant was right-handed. In addition, you will learn that Alex Thompson died at 10:04 a.m. And today, no other witness will be able to definitively account for the defendant's whereabouts at this time. Lastly, Your Honor, you will learn that Casey Davidson's clothing, his shirt, his pants, and his shoes all contained the victim's blood. And that Casey Davidson's very own walking stick had Alex Thompson's blood and skin cells embedded in it. Your Honor, by the end of this trial, you will see that Casey Davidson was looking for, and indeed found, the opportune moment to kill Alex Thompson. And for these reasons, Your Honor, the people request that you find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Did the defense wish to give an opening statement now?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the defendant stands here falsely accused of first-degree murder, a very serious crime. On September 14, 2017, my client went to the Kennedy rally to support Equality for All, the group he's a part of, and all Tutarian immigrants in their small town of Acorn. At 9:30 when he arrived, he sees Alex, the victim, throwing eggs at other EFA members, people part of his group. He calmly goes over and tells him to stop. Once he tells Alex to stop, Alex tries to take my client's walking stick. Once he tries to take his walking stick, my client stands his ground and keeps it. They get into a little scuffle over it when Alex is punched by an unknown third party. Once Alex is punched, he goes to the far side of the bathroom to clean up. My client stays and actually talks to Fabian Moreno, a witness you will hear testify today, to try to start a chant. After they talked, my client realizes his bullhorn does not have batteries, so he heads in the back direction towards the Acorn Town Shop, which you will see in Exhibit A. Once he gets to the Acorn Town Shop, he talks with Avery Williams, which he will testify today to talking to about the rally. At 10:12, my client buys batteries as in Exhibit H, which will come in later, and leaves. When he leaves, he goes straight back to the rally and tries to start a rant. He climbs the steps of Acorn Town Hall and tries. Then he is stopped by an officer, which he later learns is Detective Carroll. After he's asked to leave, he calmly goes back home and is not seen for the rest of the day. A couple days later, he's arrested at his front door, saying that he is accused of the murder of Alex Thompson by Detective Carroll, which he learned then. My client was not there at the time of the murder. The evidence and testimonies you will see today will show that my client was nowhere near the murder scene at the time of the murder. He was at the Acorn Tech Shop or on his way over. He was never even close to the murder scene. My client is an innocent man trying to fight for equality in the small town of Acorn. And the defense is trying to accuse him of being a murderer. He's a peaceful activist trying to spread equality. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. If the prosecution wants to call their first witness.
The prosecution calls Adrian Carroll to the stand.
Adrian Carroll. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the rules and facts of the mock trial competition?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated. Please state your full name and spell out your last for the record.
Adrian Carroll, Carroll.
Good evening, Detective.
Good evening.
What is your current occupation?
I'm a detective on the Acorn Police Force.
And how are you involved in today's trial?
I was one of many officers who attended the O. Kennedy speech and helped form a police line between the two political parties we have in Acorn in order to prevent violence.
And what are these two political parties?
Well, you have the OA, or Our America, who is a political group in favor of O. Kennedy's immigration policies, and Equality for All, or EFA, which is a political group against O. Kennedy's immigration policies and wanted to protect the rights of immigrants.
Are you familiar with Casey Davidson?
Yes, Mr. Davidson is a highly active and vocal member of the political groups we have in Acorn that and I've seen him at many speeches that have been assigned to monitor.
Can you please identify the defendant in this courtroom?
Mr. Davidson is on the end of the defense table in a blue suit and a white and blue striped tie.
May the record reflect that this witness has identified the defendant.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Alex Thompson?
Yes, Mr. Thompson was also a highly active and vocal member in political groups around Acorn, and I've seen him at speeches as well.
At what time did you begin to form the police line between the two sides that you mentioned earlier?
Well, although the speech wasn't scheduled till 10 a.m., police arrived at the scene at 8 a.m. in order to prepare, and we formed the police line around 9:30 when the majority of the spectators arrived.
And at what time did the speech actually occur?
Well, the speech was announced delayed at 9:40 and was rescheduled to occur at 10:20, though due to the crowd, the speech was eventually canceled.
And what did the police do after the speech was canceled?
We had ordered the crowd to leave.
Did Casey Davidson comply with this police order?
No, Casey Davidson had climbed the steps of Town Hall, stood in front of a podium, and shouted into a bullhorn, "There aren't enough police to stop us. Let's get these 10 Terran haters now. We stop this stupid speech. No O'Kennedy." It was right then that a riot broke out.
And what occurred, if anything, after the riot broke out?
Well, after I had told Davidson to leave, I got a call on my radio that a body had been found in Acorn Park, so I headed over to investigate, and I discovered that the victim had been Alex Thompson, and there was blood on his face, his head, and his clothes.
Were you able to identify a murder weapon at the crime scene?
I was able to identify 2 possible murder weapons at the crime scene.
And what was one of these possible murder weapons?
One of these weapons was a walking stick about 4 feet in length and had the initials C and D carved into it, and it was found about 10 feet away from the body.
Was this walking stick turned in for blood and DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
And what was distinctive of the walking stick as a possible murder weapon, if anything?
The walking stick had significantly more blood.
Detective Carroll, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, that's the walking stick I found at the crime scene.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the walking stick that you found?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution requests that Exhibit F be moved into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
You receive.
Following the discovery of the body, did you ever conduct any interviews?
Yes, I did. I conducted several interviews over the course of many days. The first one being of Morgan Bonderman, the individual who found the body, and Hayden Rodriguez, an individual present at the rally.
Did you ever take any action based upon these interviews?
Yes, I had learned through these interviews that Casey Davidson's car had been spotted near the warehouse where Thompson lived twice 2 weeks prior to the rally, so I obtained a police order to obtain the Jeep. I learned that he'd been spotted near the warehouse.
So, during your investigation of this case, did you ever conduct a search of this defendant's social media?
Yes, I did, and I found 2 threatening messages posted on Thompson's lab page.
What was the first message?
The first message had been posted 3 months ago and had read, "O'Kennedy followers like Thompson don't deserve to live."
And what was the second message?
Second message had been posted on September 10th and read, "Someone should kill idiots like you."
Detective, did you ever search the defendant's residence?
Yes, and I found a gray t-shirt, jeans, and shoes, all of which had blood on them.
Detective Carroll, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, that's the shirt I seized from Davidson's home.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of this shirt that you seized?
Yes, it is.
Do you recognize exhibit D?
Yes, those are the pants I had seized from Davidson's home.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the pants that you seized?
Yes, it is.
And lastly, Detective, do you recognize exhibit E?
Yes, those are the shoes I seized from Davidson's home.
Are these a fair and accurate depiction of the shoes that you seized from the defendant's home?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, the prosecution requests that exhibit C, D, and E be moved into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, you receive.
Your Honor, at this time, I have no further questions for this witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening.
Good evening.
The group Equality for All is considered a nonviolent group, correct?
Yes.
And the group Our America is against immigration.
I do not know for sure, but that's what I believe.
And the Ultranettes are a more extreme right-wing group, correct?
Yes.
And it is true. And is it true that the Ultranettes have been arrested for being violent against people in the past?
Yes.
And Thompson was identified as an Ultranet, correct?
Yes.
And is it true during the rally you had a police line separating both groups?
Yes, we did, in order to prevent violence between the 2 political groups.
And a number of people crossed this line?
It did become rapid, but yes.
And you did not And there were a number of fights, correct?
A couple, yes.
When you arrived at the scene of Thompson's body, there were a number of potential murder weapons, correct?
Two mostly possible murder weapons.
What were these potential murder weapons?
Like I said, the first one was a walking stick about 4 feet in length, covered in blood, and had the initials C and D carved into it. The second one had been a tree branch found at the scene.
Did this tree branch have any blood on it?
It did have some blood.
You retraced the steps of Acorn Town Hall, correct?
Yes.
And when you walked the distances between Town Hall and the body, there weren't hundreds of people in between you and the body, were there?
No, there
Objection,
was-
Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained. You want to ask another question?
No, Your Honor, no further questions. Thank you.
No redirect, Your Honor. May this witness please be seated?
Pardon?
May this witness please be seated? No redirect.
Okay, thank you. Next witness?
If you will call David Morrison to the stand.
David Morrison? Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the rules and facts of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Please be seated. Please state your full name and spell out your last for the record.
Devin Morrison, Morrison. Good evening, Dr. Morrison. Good evening. What is your occupation? I currently work as a medical examiner for the city of Acorn, which I've been working as for the past 15 years. What is your educational background? I earned my bachelor's degree in biology from East California University and my MD from Northern California State. And how are you involved in today's case? I conducted the autopsy on the victim, Alex Thompson, as well as looked into his fitness tracker. I then looked into the walking stick found at the scene of the crime, as well as the clothing obtained from Davidson's house. After I made my investigations, I made professional opinions about the case. May I approach the witness? Dr. Morrison, I'm now handing you what is Exhibit I. Do you recognize Exhibit I? I do. What is Exhibit I? This is the autopsy report I filed for Alex Thompson. And is this a fair and accurate depiction of the autopsy report you filed? It is. Dr. Morrison, what do you typically list in an autopsy report? I'm responsible for establishing the background of the deceased, any marks and wounds found on the body, as well as the probable cause of death. And can you describe any marks and wounds that you may have found in Alex Thompson's body? Well, most importantly, there were 2 depressed skull fractures found on the left side of the victim's head, just above the ear and around the temple region. There are also many marks and wounds, such as scratches and bruises, found on the insides of the victim's forearms. Some of these were fresh and others were a couple days old. Your Honor, at this time, we would like to request that Exhibit I be moved into evidence. No objection, Your Honor.
Copy received.
Dr. Morrison, what did you conclude from these observations? The definitive cause of death had to be from the 2 depressed skull fractures, which had led to a subdural hematoma. The marks and wounds were consistent with defensive wounds, which had led me to believe that the victim had suffered from a frontal attack by a right-handed assailant due to the placement of the subdural hematoma. Did you discover anything else that was notable in Alex Thompson's body? I did. I also found skin cells from underneath Thompson's fingernails. What did you discover from these skin cells? The DNA of these skin cells were matched to Casey Davidson, which had led me to believe that both the victim and the defendant had been in a recent quarrel. Dr. Morrison, earlier you mentioned that you examined the fitness tracker of Alex Thompson. How did you come by this information? I got this information through a court order from the fitness tracker company. And what did you learn from this information? At approximately 10:03 a.m., the victim's heart rate had spiked to 164, and at 10:04 a.m., no heart rate had registered. What did you conclude from this? At approximately 10:03 a.m., the victim had been attacked, and within this time frame, the assailant had found the opportunity to attack Thompson not once but twice in the head, and at 10:04, the victim had died. Dr. Morrison, you also mentioned earlier they examined Casey Davidson's belongings. What did you notice about these belongings? First of all, there was a long, thin blood transfer smear found on the bottom right of the defendant's shirt. On the left pant leg, I found fine blood splatter, and on the walking stick, I found a large amount of blood. Within this blood, I found Thompson's skin cells. What were your professional opinions about these belongings?
The long, thin blood transfer smear is consistent with a long, bloody item, such as a walking stick being wiped across the fabric. The fine blood splatter is consistent with whoever had worn the clothing being in the vicinity of where Thompson had been struck in the head, and the amount of blood found on the walking stick would be consistent with the amount of blood that would have been issued from the subdural hematoma.
Dr. Morrison, did you examine any other items of relevance to this case?
I did. I looked into the tree branch found at the scene of the crime.
What was your examination of the tree branch?
It was rotten, and the amount of blood found on this tree branch was not as great as the amount found on the walking stick, and also there were no skin cells embedded within it. It's very probable that it simply fell off by a nearby tree and was present at the crime scene.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
You may cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor. You and Thompson went to the same country club?
That is correct, but we did not know of each other.
You mentioned that you examined the walking stick and you found an extra set of fingerprints on the walking stick, correct?
That is true.
And you were unable to identify these fingerprints, correct?
They were unidentified.
And they were found toward the near end of the walking stick, like if someone was holding a baseball bat.
They were at the end of the walking stick. Yes.
Is it possible that the fitness tracker broke at 10:04?
I'm not aware if the fitness tracker is broken. All I'm aware of is that the screen is broken. I got my information through a court order.
So, if the fitness tracker broke, you would not be sure what time the victim could have died.
I believe that due to the amount of stress that the victim had suffered from and due to how they died, I believe that it would have been around 10:04 if not than 10:05.
So, the victim could have died after 10:04.
Shortly afterwards.
Is it possible that the victim turned around and ran and was then struck by a left-handed person?
It's not likely due to the actual placement of the subdural of the two depressed skull fractures. The two depressed skull fractures were on the temple region, suggesting from the angle that the victim had suffered, that the injuries had been inflicted on the victim. It would not be very likely.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Sustained.
Is it possible that the victim turned around and ran and was then struck by a left-handed person?
I don't believe
Objection,
so.
Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Well, it wasn't answered that one first time, so she has a right to ask it again. And she did.
Is that a yes or a no?
It's not likely.
You say that it is difficult to match weapons based on shape of wounds, correct?
If you look purely at the shape of the wound, yes.
You found partial fingerprints on the tree branch, correct?
Yes.
So, is it possible that the tree branch could have been the murder weapon?
The blood splatter that I found on the tree branch was cast off splatter, so I don't believe so.
Is that a yes or a no?
It's a no.
No further questions.
No redirect, Your Honor. May this witness please be excused?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
The people now call Hayden Rodriguez to the stand.
Rodriguez. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the rules and facts of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Please be seated. Please state your full name and spell out your last for the record.
Hayden Rodriguez, RODRIGUEZ.
Your Honor, before we begin questioning, the people request a time check.
The people have 5 minutes and 27 seconds remaining, and the defense has 6 minutes and 25 seconds remaining.
Good evening, Ms. Rodriguez.
Good evening.
What is your current occupation?
I'm a reporter for the Acorn Herald.
As a reporter, are you aware of the political groups in Acorn?
Yes, like the Rats, for example.
And are you currently reporting on anything?
Yes, so a Kennedy speech and its known members like Keith Davidson and Alex Thompson.
Were you present at the speech?
Yes.
What, if anything, stood out to you while you were at the speech?
I saw Keith Davidson screaming and shoving at people who were just minding their own business.
What, if anything, caught your eye?
There was an altercation between Casey Davidson and Alex Thompson.
And where were you when you saw this altercation?
I was only a few feet away.
And do you know what this altercation was about?
It was over Davidson's walking stick, and Davidson said, "Get back on your side of the line, or you'll get what's coming to you."
What happened after this?
Thompson was punched by an unknown person and rushed toward the direction of the bathroom.
And do you know what happened next?
Davidson followed Thompson in the same direction with the walking stick in hand and said, "Here's my chance."
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You're a reporter to Reestablish, correct?
Correct.
And you were at the speech looking for a story, correct?
To tell the truth, but yeah.
You were near Alex Thompson and Casey Davidson when the punch happened, correct?
Correct.
And when you got home, you discovered you had blood on your shoes, correct?
That's correct.
You were only a few feet away,
Yes.
so it must have been a large amount of blood, correct?
A few droplets, but yes.
When you found out Mr. Thompson was murdered, did you give the information for justice?
Yes, I reported all my findings to the police.
No further questions, Your Honor.
No reader, Your Honor. May this witness please be excused?
Yes, thank you.
The people call Morgan Bonderman to the stand.
Morgan Bonderman?